This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 181 of Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me here on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. We've been doing this for 181 episodes, Mark. How are you doing today?
That's crazy. Because I know you always say what episode number it is, and I don't think I just, it kind of blends together. You know, we do this every week, and you don't ever think about how many episodes it's been. But as you were starting to intro it, I was like, what episode is it? And then you said 181. Wow.
We're closing in on 200.
Yeah, when will that break out to? Is that like right around the draft? I'm trying to think like week wise. I don't know. That'd be fun. We have to figure out something to do for episode 200.
It probably won't, because I assume we'll put our draft stuff under Armchair Scouts instead of Chalk Talk, so there'll be like a break in episode numbering for a little bit.
Okay.
I'm not sure where we can figure that out, but I'm not sure exactly where that'll end up falling.
That's funny. We'll have to figure that out. That's fun. But yeah, I'm doing well. Victory Monday, even though if you looked at Eagles Twitter, you might not know it.
Yeah, we need some dedicated fans to dig back through our 181 episodes and go like clip out the most outrageous things that we said that turned out to be right or wrong. And maybe we need like a 200th episode clip edition. But yeah, it's a Victory Monday, even though it might not feel like that on Twitter. Be careful out there. But we are going to dive in and talk about all the non-Eagles games, because you're going to get plenty of Eagles content on the Eagles Pinpool Network. And so let's start out like we always do with the NFC East. And there's only one game in the division this week because the Cowboys and the Commanders, Cowboys play tonight, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they have not played. And then the Commanders were on a bye week. I started to say they were both on a bye, but we only have a Giants game to talk about, and Giants games are barely worth talking about. But here we go. The Giants lose 14-11 to the New Orleans Saints. And in this game, the Giants scored a touchdown and converted a 2-point conversion attempt to get it to 14-11 with 3 minutes left. And then they got a 3-and-out. The offense threw an interception. The defense got another 3-and-out. And then the Giants missed a chip shot, or they had a chip shot field goal be blocked. So, for Giants fans, good news. You lost the game. Keep that draft pick alive. But I sure would have liked to have seen the Giants manage to win this game. I would like to see them win a few before the end of the year.
Yeah, so this game came on. I didn't see a second of this game while the Eagles were on. The Sixers were also on at 1 o'clock. Had an eye on a couple games. I bet we'll get to a funny one that I was watching. It's funny that this was the NFL game I was watching. But Giants Saints was not on my radar. But when the local coverage shut off for the Eagles game, they cut to Giants Saints. And I saw Tommy DeVito throw a pick down 14-11 pretty late in the game. And then it was my wife's birthday. Shout out to Mrs. Henry. But I had to drive to go see her parents. And I assumed the game ended. I assumed Tommy DeVito's interception was the nail in the coffin there. And then when I got there, they told me, they had a field goal blocked to lose or to not tie the game. Pretty funny stuff. But if you're a Giants fan, you're happy that the field goal was blocked, obviously. Yeah. Although the interesting thing with how I really think there's only one first round worthy quarterback in this draft class. We can talk about Cam Ward when we maybe Cam Ward too.
Time out. Did Tommy DeVito come into the game?
Was it not DeVito? It was Locke.
Yeah.
That shows how unplugged
I was sitting here thinking
I don't know who it was.
I was like looking it up. I was like, wait, did Drew Lock get injured? Because I thought he was starting. Yeah, Locke. It was Locke. But anyways, everything else stands. Carry on.
Yeah,
It's not like it
I don't
matters
know.
who their
I
quarterback
don't know why I
is.
thought DeVito was playing. I knew he was hurt, but yeah, whatever. Whoever Giants quarterback, insert name here. I saw that pick and I thought, the game was over. But yeah, it's if you're the Giants and the Raiders or whoever else is kind of at the top of the board, obviously needing a quarterback, Shedeur Sanders is going to get picked really high in the first round, it appears. And, I don't think he's an elite quarterback prospect. I'll have a first round grade on him for sure. Outside of Shedeur, like Cam Ward probably ends up going in the first round. I don't know if he's a first round draft prospect. I mean, he's a guy who started out his college career at Incarnate Word. So these teams are losing, and it feels like tankathons being emphasized more than ever this year on Twitter. And I don't know who people are tanking for. Like, I don't know who the number one pick is. And if Shadeur's the number one pick, they really need a quarterback. I guess that's fine. But I don't think he's like a number one pick worthy quarterback.
Yeah, I feel I'm not into a lot of the draft eval stuff yet, but I'm pretty confident I'll have a first round grade on Shedeur, but he also would not be on my board if I was a decision maker for an NFL team. I wouldn't even consider him, period.
Why?
I think there's a lot of immaturity there, and there's a lot of question marks about dad too. And I would be very concerned about having Shedeur Sanders be the face of my franchise. Every year there's a lot of guys that NFL teams for various reasons just don't have on a board. And maybe in interviews he'll come across differently, but he's not someone that I would necessarily want as the face of my franchise.
Yeah, I've had concerns about that, and I hated it at the beginning of the year. The quote after the Nebraska game, talking about did Raiola get sacked or whatever that was. It did seem like his team loved him by the end of the year. There were some quotes out there, and his O-line loves him. He was doing interviews with the O-line at the end of the year. It does seem like I don't know if he's matured throughout the year, if that's fair, or whatever the case may be. It'll be interesting to see how the offseason's handled with him and the draft kind of situation's handled. But I do think he's going to end up going really high because of the fact that there's a lack of quarterback prospects and there's a lack of really available quarterbacks who are of any interest, really.
Yeah. He will probably be the number one pick, but the number one pick should probably be a different guy that plays on his same team. We can leave it at that.
I don't think I'm going to end up being. I don't think Travis Hunter will be my number one overall guy.
Yeah,
I think it's what we're talking about the Giants. It's probably more worth talking about than anything on the team. What do you think Travis Hunter does at the next level in terms of playing both ways or not?
I don't think you can't play both ways in the NFL in the way that he's doing it in college. You could be a defensive back that is on the field for a package of offensive plays. I think that's the most likely outcome if you're going to try to play him both ways, which is probably what I would do. I would probably draft him as a defensive back, and maybe we put a package together for him on offense. But you can't really do the offensive player, and there's a package of defensive plays because you got to know everything on the defense. Like it can't be that big of a tell when you come into the game. So I think that's probably what the most likely outcome is. But if I'm him, I want to play receiver because receivers make more. So that's where I'd want to go if I was him.
Yeah, it's really going to be one of the more interesting draft conversations of all time. He's kind of made it seem like he wants to do what he's doing now and play both ways full time, which I just don't know what the longevity of that could be. And the interesting thing is I went through it a little bit with some rankings, and my top two guys, I think I had Hunter 3 or 4, but my top two guys are a receiver in Tedoroa McMillan at Arizona and a corner in Will Johnson from Michigan. And I think McMillan's a better receiver prospect than Hunter, pretty undoubtedly. I think Will Johnson's a markedly better corner prospect than Hunter. Maybe some will disagree with that out there. But if we're saying Hunter's not playing both ways, that's where I struggle.
Yeah.
Maybe he shouldn't even be 3 or 4. Maybe he should be like 7 or 8 or 9. And that's a whole other conversation, though. I thought that was fun. That was a fun.
Yeah. And that's a conversation I'll be able to have a more firm stance on once we get through the NFL season for sure.
I don't have a stance on what Hunter's going to do at the next level. I think it probably depends on the team that takes him.
Yeah, that's fair for sure. So, all right, let's dive into the rest of the action. We'll save Thursday for the end like we did last week. I kind of like how that worked out, even though it was a big game. But let's get into the Sunday slate. We'll go to Tennessee first. The Jaguars beat the Titans 10-6. I'm going to read you my headline for this game, and I have nothing else written down. Was the Jaguars end a 9-game road losing streak behind a Mac Jones 0 touchdown, 2 interception effort in a game where they were shut out for the first 53 minutes of the game. That's it. That's all I have on this game. There's nothing that interests me about this football game.
This was the 1:00 game I was tracking. Aside from the Eagles
Of course.
game, this was the game I was watching because I had Jags plus 3.5, cash it outright, and they win the game. I just thought them being a 3.5 point dog to the Titans. I thought the Titans being a 3.5 point favorite against anybody was an abomination. And the Jags kept it close with Houston 2 weeks ago. Maybe Doug saves his job here down the stretch with Mac Jones. No,
Can you imagine?
I'm joking, but it does feel like
they trade Trevor Lawrence in the offseason and commit to a rebuild around Mac Jones.
Yeah. They weirdly have like a hilariously terrible schedule down the stretch. It's Jets at Raiders, Titans, and then at Colts. So they might like totally ruin their draft pick here. But I'll be betting them again, plus 3.5 at home against the Jets next week. 3.5 home dog. I'm all in.
All right. Let's talk about the Jets because that's the next game on my rundown here. They lose to the Dolphins 26-32 in overtime. And this game started really fast. Every possession in the first half resulted in points. And then the second half, it slows down a little bit. But Miami gets the ball after the Jets took a 26-23 lead with 52 seconds left. But they get a kick return to the 46-yard line. Go 20 more yards, and they hit a 52-yard field goal to tie the game. They get the ball first in overtime, and then they walked it off. Jonnu Smith had 0 catches in regulation. He had 3 catches for 44 yards and the game-winning touchdown in overtime. But the Jets are now 3-10 this season through 13 games with Aaron Rodgers. Last year, through 13 games of Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle, they were 5-8. And ironically, this is probably the best Rodgers game of the year. And, Eagles fans are very familiar with the Nick Foles left the field with the lead line from a few years ago. Aaron Rodgers left the field with the lead, and it did not pay off as the Jets fall once again. My only other note on this game is it is scoregami. It's the first time we've had a 26-32 result in an NFL game. Any thoughts on this game?
That's shocking that's a scoregami, to be honest.
Yeah.
32 is the weird number, I guess, there, more than 26. But yeah, Miami, this game concerned me more than I would say encouraged me in terms of them going on any sort of run here to maybe give the Broncos or the Chargers or the Raiders or whoever a scare that they could make the wild card. They do have a pretty favorable schedule down the stretch. And I always look at next week's game after I'm done my radio show on Saturday to kind of get an idea of what the week after looks like and even kind of tab some early lines. The books out there do have some early lines usually for the week ahead. And I saw Dolphins were playing at Houston next week. And I thought, oh, man, I think Houston's a fraud. I've been really consistent on that. I love betting against this Houston team. I think they're overvalued. I don't think they're as good as their 8-5 record. So I thought, man, Miami plus 3, 2.5, whatever it is at Houston next week. I'm going to hammer that. And throughout that game, tracking it against the Jets, I was kind of like, do I still want to bet the Dolphins next week? And I think I will, but nowhere nearly as confident as when I first saw the number out there. They definitely still had some of the concerns lingering from the Green Bay game prior on Thanksgiving.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into another game. Another team that's got a lot of concerns, and we talked about them last week, is the Atlanta Falcons, who lose 21-42 at Minnesota. And Kirk Cousins just put up empty stats in this game. He throws for 344 yards, but he had no touchdowns and 2 interceptions. That touchdown to interception ratio is 0-8 in the last 4 games.
Yeah.
He did connect on 5 passes of over 20 yards, but it was all just disjointed and inconsistent. And when you compare it to the guy that Minnesota replaced him with in Sam Darnold, Darnold was really good in this game. 22 of 28. He throws for 247 and 5 touchdowns. He hit on 5 throws of 20 plus air yards. 3 of them were 30 plus air yards. And Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson just dominated this game. Addison had 133 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jefferson had 132 and 2 touchdowns. I don't know. Minnesota just looks really good, and Atlanta continues to kind of spiral as the Buccaneers kind of regain their control. I think they've got control of their own destiny now. I think if I looked at that right.
Yes.
So
they do.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts? I know is it time to go to Penix? Other thoughts from this game? Where are you at?
Yeah, I think it's definitely time to go to Penix. I thought this was like the last reason to keep him in was to face Minnesota and to see if there's some revenge game juice there. But no touchdowns, 8 picks in the last 4 games. I think that's the stick a fork in Kirk Cousins, stick a fork in the Falcons. Stop worrying about this season and start worrying about Penix. And I know that I think you have to cut Kirk and pay him $50 million in the dead cap next year, and then you're done with it. You wouldn't have to. There's no penalty after that. So. Which is kind of why I wasn't as critical of the Kirk and Penix move as some were. I didn't love it, but I did think, it wasn't like it was a real 4-year deal. They were always able to get out after 2 years in case something like this happened. But the big takeaway is Kevin O'Connell. I think Kevin O'Connell's the coach of the year personally. I think you look at Kirk's regression since leaving Kevin O'Connell, and you look at what Sam Darnold's done there. You look at what guys like Josh Dobbs did, and Mullins had like a 400-yard game last year on primetime. I remember in O'Connell's offense for Minnesota. I just think he's one of the very best offensive play callers in the sport, and obviously it helps a lot when you have Justin Jefferson out there commanding as much attention as he does. And then in this game. There's been games recently where they've not went to Jefferson as frequently, and they still done well in the passing game because so much attention's paid to Jefferson. This game was not one of those games. Obviously, 7 catches, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he's the best non-quarterback in the sport, probably.
Yeah. It's for Kirk Cousins' contract. I looked it up while you were talking there. They will owe him $65 million in dead cap. So they can either pre-June 1 cut him and they eat it all next year.
I heard it was 50 if it was post-June 1.
If it's post-June 1, it'd be 40 next year and 25 the year after. So
no, I heard that.
Depending on how they want to do it. At least that's according to Spot Track. That's what Spot Track has up. Sometimes they're off on stuff too, but so that's kind of where they're at with his contract. And I can't imagine he's on the roster next year.
My take on it is how expensive is it? Like, how expensive is it to have him on the roster as the backup?
It would be cheaper than pre-June 1 cutting him. Hold on.
Like, how much does he make? I guess. Like, what's his cap hit this year?
His cap hit next year would be $40 million.
So
if they post June 1 cut him, they would essentially save, let's see, if they post June 1 cut him, it's basically a wash next year. His dead cap and his cap hit would be the exact same, but they get out of the contract completely after 2026. If they pre-June 1 cut him, it actually costs them an extra $25 million next year. So I can't imagine they would probably do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can always do the cutting as like you can designate it as post June 1, right?
Right.
Still let him. So, yeah, that would probably be what they do. But they should probably just keep him as the backup. I don't. The thing with that is his answer is going to be like, why would I do that? But it's not. I mean, it's not a contract, right? So like, it's not. They could just keep him as the backup and not have to deal with all the dead cap, right? So
right.
And you have him as a backup. Are people going to want Kirk Cousins as their starting quarterback next year?
No.
So yeah, I don't know like what the path for Kirk is. So like, why not just be the backup? I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I'd ride that cash cow out into the sunset personally, but that's just my take. So let's keep rolling here. Let's go to the Pittsburgh Steelers hosting the Cleveland Browns. They win 27-14, and The Steelers defense recorded 16 pressures and they sacked Jameis Winston 3 times. They didn't just rush the passer either. Keanu Benton intercepted a screen pass too. And so the Steelers defense they were on fire in this one. The Browns have kicker issues along with like half the league, apparently. Dustin Hopkins missed a 38-yard field goal and a 43-yard field goal on back-to-back drives. Now, it was like the last drive of the first half, first drive of the second half, but he's missed 9 field goals now this year. And so that really hurt the Browns. The Steelers offense struggled in this game too. After Russ's like 400-yard performance a week ago, they went 3 and out on 4 of their first 5 drives in this game. And Russell Wilson was 8 of 16 for 46 yards at halftime. He ended the day with only 158 passing yards, and the rushing attack was under 3.5 yards per carry. So it was a rough day in the office for the Steelers offense, but the Steelers defense looked really good after a week ago where it was kind of flipped. So what were your takes on this one?
Yeah, I won't be too critical of the offense. No Pickens. They got by. The defense is obviously really good. You got bad Jameis in this game, so not much to take away. You know, it was pretty obvious, I think, that the Browns weren't going to beat the Steelers twice in like 3 weeks or however long it was. So I thought this was a pretty obvious outcome, to be honest.
By the way, I loathe the play a divisional opponent 2 times in 3 weeks thing that the NFL does all the time.
It's so dumb.
Yeah, I think Seattle and Arizona was the same thing, right? This was second time in 3 weeks for Seattle, Arizona too. I hate that. I hate it so much, but
yeah, it's dumb.
So anyways, one more game to get to before we get to that Seattle, Arizona game. It's the Raiders at the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers win 28-13. Aiden O'Connell leaves this game with an air cast on his leg after he was pushed by Kalijah Kancey 2 steps after he threw a pass. It didn't look bad. Like, I mean, that play happens like every NFL game when you're chasing the guy and he throws the ball and you just push him in the back. Like, it happens all the time, but I don't know if he just like planted weird. I couldn't even really see it on the replays, but whatever it was, it's some sort of knee injury, and you hate to see that. The Raiders have had so many quarterback issues and injuries this year, and I believe Aiden O'Connell had already been on IR once this season and had come back. So Desmond Ridder had to come into the game, and that went predictably. The Bucs, they put up a lot of yards of offense. They were over 400 yards, but turnovers were a real issue. They turned it over twice last week against the Panthers in an overtime victory. This week, Baker Mayfield fumbled once and threw 2 interceptions, but they were able to overcome it. And they did it on the strength of a rushing attack that was without Bucky Irving. He left the game after only 3 or 4 carries, and they put up 5.8 yards per carry with Rashad White and Sean Tucker. And so the Bucs regained control of the division. They're tremendously beat up. I think I saw Antoine Winfield's going to miss a couple games, but they are still alive and in control of their own destiny moving into the last few weeks of the season.
Yeah, Tampa Bay is going to win that division. I think Tampa's probably better than whoever's going to win the West. I think they're probably better than Seattle if healthy. I guess they're not going to ever be fully healthy with some of the pieces that they lost. The big takeaway for me in this game, it was, I know you're not a big fantasy head, Shane. We're getting into the nitty gritty here. Fantasy playoffs starting next week. Luckily, I've got a bye in my 3 biggest leagues, but Bucky Irving was questionable coming into this game, very 50-50. The Bucs come out and say they're going to play him. He gets 4 carries and 1 catch, and they basically took him off the field after the first quarter. And they said that he didn't feel great, whatever. Fantasy heads out there. You might have a new enemy in Liam Cohen and Todd Bowles and Bucky Irving. You can't lie to the fantasy heads like that.
Yeah, for sure. It's part of why I'm not big into fantasy. I got tired of all of that stuff. But one other notable thing in this game is Brock Bowers surpassed Sam Laporta's record for rookie tight end receptions. He had 3 catches for 49 yards, which gets him to 87 catches on the year, surpassing Laporta's record of 86. But it was actually your guy, Michael Mayer, who led the team with 7 catches for 68 yards. And so it's a tight end offense in Las Vegas, apparently.
Bowers is so by far the best tight end in the sport already. It's unbelievable. I mean, he didn't have a great game here, but he is. I don't know if I've ever seen a rookie tight end even close to as good as I think he is right away. And I don't even know, like the offensive rookie of the year thing really bothers me. That Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels are like the odds-on favorites, and Brock Bowers is like 15-1. Why are we applying like? And this this was more when Saquon was more of an MVP candidate, and obviously I've expressed my annoyance at that whole conversation. But I thought that we were applying the MVP conversation more to the offensive rookie of the year than we were to the MVP, with Saquon being so high up. Brock Bowers, I don't know what he'd have to be doing as a tight end on a bad team to win that award. And it's not like Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels has really cooled off. Bo Nix had a pretty brutal start to the year. It's not like either of them are, putting up elite numbers at the quarterback position. I think Bowers should be the offensive rookie of the year.
I agree with that. Maybe he's not high on that because a lot of people like just watch him and they think, oh, that dude's like 38 years old. Yeah, and they just it doesn't click that he's a rookie because he's like, A, he might be the best tight end in the game already, and B, he looks like he's been in the league for 15 years when you see him without his helmet on.
And C, if you've watched any big college football games over the last 4 years, he's been in all of them. Like he's been in so many. He played his full, he played all the years there at Georgia and played in so many big games, at least like 3 or 4 every year. So people are just familiar with him, I feel like, in a way that's different than most rookies.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get into the afternoon slate. This is another one of those 2 games in 3 weeks situations, but Seattle travels to Arizona and they win 30-18. And Arizona went on an opening touchdown drive that put them up 7-0. But then Kyler Murray threw interceptions on back-to-back drives, and it was actually back-to-back passing attempts. There were just some rushes in between. And Seattle capitalized, flipping that 7-0 deficit into a 17-7 lead that they would never surrender. Zach Charbonnet had a big game filling in for injured Kenneth Walker. He had 134 yards and 2 touchdowns on 22 carries. He also added 59 yards receiving on 7 receptions. And he became only the 3rd player in Seahawks franchise history with 100 or more rushing yards, multiple rushing touchdowns, and 50 or more receiving yards in the same game. Sean Alexander and Ricky Waters are the other 2, by the way. The Cardinals did have a chance to pull this back within a 1-score game in the 4th quarter, and their kicker misses a 40-yard field goal attempt. Again, kickers just stink this year. It was his 4th miss under 50 yards this season, and now they've lost twice in 3 weeks to Seattle, and that effectively ends the Cardinals season. They trail the division by 2 games, but also the tiebreaker. And so there's 4 games left, and they effectively trail Seattle by 3 games. So it's pretty much over for the Cardinals now. The division is still interesting, though, because Seattle faces Green Bay and Minnesota the next 2 weeks. And then they have a red-hot Rams team in Week 18, and the Rams are only a game back. So we're going to talk about the Rams in the next game. But watching the Seahawks-Rams come down to the wire in a potential Week 18 matchup is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'll get to the Cardinals in a second, but with the Seahawks, I kind of think the Seahawks are frauds. I'll say it. I don't think I'm thinking the Seahawks are anything special. You look at let's take a look at the last 6 weeks, which includes their 4-game winning streak. They lost 31-10 at home to Buffalo, and then they lost 26-20 at home in overtime to the Rams. Those are not bad losses, but I mean, they got pummeled by Buffalo in Seattle. But then after that, that's clearly when the season turned. They were 4-5. They're now 8-5. They go on a 4-game win streak. You go to San Fran. You beat a 49ers team that's been mostly dead over the last month or 2 by 3 points. You beat the Cardinals 16-6. It's very clear that they have the Cardinals figured out. That you beat the Cardinals 16-6, then you obviously beat them this week 30-18, and you barely beat the Jets 26-21. I'm seeing some takes about the Seahawks out there being like, oh, are they the 3rd or 4th best team in the NFC? I'm going the other way. I still think they're like the 7th best team. I still think I'm taking the Lions, the Eagles, the Packers, the Vikings, the Bucks, and then I'll listen to Seattle. at that point, probably. So good for them that they've turned it around. McDonald definitely seems to have gotten the guys bought in. The defense is playing a lot better. But I just think when it comes down to, and they actually have a kind of hard schedule down the stretch now that I'm looking at it. Green Bay, Minnesota, at Chicago, that's a win. And then at the Rams, there's a chance they go into that Rams game 9-7, and they're 8-5 right now. I do think they lose this week against Green Bay, but I think the more interesting conversation is actually on the other side, on the negative side. Next year,
you were talking about NFC like tiering here. Of the teams that could feasibly make the playoffs, the Seahawks are the team that I would most want to play. I would rather play them than the Rams because the Rams can go nuclear. I just don't think Seattle can. I would rather play them than the Buccaneers, although the Buccaneers just tend to have the Eagles number. But
exactly.
If you were picking and there's no way you're going to face them in the first round because it's going to be a division winner. I guess it could potentially be a wild card team, but I would rather play them than Washington for a third time. Like that would be at the risk of being old takes exposed. If this goes poorly, the Seahawks are the team I would most want to see the Eagles face in the playoffs.
I'll tell you what my preferred path would be. Eagles. Let's say that the Eagles are the 2 seed. Let's not even get into, dream scenarios of 1 seed stuff. If the Eagles are the 2 seed, you get the Commanders as the 7 seed, and then you play the 3 seed or 4 seed Seahawks in the second round in Philly, regardless of what that conference championship, game is. That's a pretty good path for the Eagles. I would say Washington and Seattle are those 2 teams that I would want to see. On the other side with Arizona, do the Arizona Cardinals start the 2025 football season with Jonathan Gannon at head coach and Kyler Murray at quarterback? Can you go into year 3 of a regime where there doesn't seem like there's going to be a big step this year with the same kind of formula?
I kind of feel like he might get one more year.
Both?
I kind of think they might give it one more year because maybe not, but that's kind of the direction I lean right now. I'm not saying I would necessarily. I think I would probably try a different coach because I feel like you're a lot more committed to Kyler than you are to Gannon. But I think that he probably gets one more year.
I will say, watching Kyler the last couple weeks, I've started to kind of be I'm kind of souring on Kyler a little bit right now. I don't think he's playing well. I don't think he's, even trying to get the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr. for most of the game, it appears. I don't think that offense is well coached at all. And maybe that's on, that's probably more on Drew Petzing than Jonathan Gannon. But I don't think they can come back with the same head coach, the same quarterback, and the same offensive play caller. So if they're going to bring Gannon and Kyler back, I'd like to see them bring in a new OC for sure. And it seems like there's been some friction with Kyler and Petzing when, he was asked about getting the ball to Marv, and he had the whole quote, that's Drew Petzing's job. Ask Drew Petzing. He wouldn't answer the question, and he kept referring to him. I think that there's you mentioned immaturity things. There might be that a little bit with Kyler Murray too. So I wouldn't be surprised if, after week 18, we start to hear Cardinals are interested in trading Kyler Murray. If I was Gannon, I feel like you're not going to save your job next year with Kyler. I feel like your chance at saving your job would be trying something new almost. It seems like they just don't mesh. I think whatever this coaching staff is trying to do and whatever Kyler looked better with Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's a good coach. So,
yeah. I'm not sure what the answer is for the Cardinals. I don't know. I don't know where they go, to be honest.
I would fire Gannon. I agree. I tend to agree with you. I would fire Gannon and bring in a whole new staff and probably try one more year with Kyler. But man, I'm starting to think bringing the whole crew back would be a disaster, I think.
Yeah, that would be a tough sell for sure.
Hey, it's Emma Chamberlain. I designed these new glasses for Warby Parker, and I basically can't take them off. I'm showering in them and sleeping in them. They're just that good. Go see them all at warbyparker.com. And you know what? Have a good day too. Okay? All right? Bye.
So, okay, let's move on to the Bills at the Rams. And this game went nuclear. The Bills lose 42-44. This is the Rams team I've said I'm scared of. Like, they are too good to feel good about playing them when their offense is healthy. But I think they're too inconsistent to be a serious contender.
Mm-hmm.
In this game, they only punted 2 times. And technically, I mean, the second time was a punt that was literally the last play of the game. The punt ran the clock out. And so I don't even know if we count that. But the Rams had 8 possessions with 2 punts, one of which ended the game. They had 5 touchdowns and a field goal. The Bills had 9 possessions with 3 punts and 6 touchdowns. There was over 900 yards of offense in this game. Stafford was 23 of 30 for 320 yards and 2 touchdowns. Josh Allen threw for 342 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also rushed for 82 yards and 3 touchdowns. And it wasn't enough. He is the first player in NFL history to have 3 passing touchdowns and 3 rushing touchdowns in the same game. And it came in a losing effort. Just no defense in this game whatsoever from either team. It was a crazy game to watch. It reminded me, was it Rams Chiefs several years ago that was like that electric 50? Yeah, it's always the Rams. But cue Nick Sirianni, it's always him. But it's always the Rams. If you're a fan of offensive football, this was a great one. If you're fans of defense, this was quite offensive, honestly. But what were your thoughts on this one?
A couple thoughts. My first one is that the blocked punt always is going to kind of throw things out of whack. I do think the Rams going up 17-7 on a blocked punt that they returned for a touchdown kind of does. It was going to always be hard for Buffalo to win. And, they got pretty darn close at multiple points there after that. But, and then the end of the game, McDermott really screwed them. It was a really poor job by McDermott with that. They QB snuck on first and goal at the 1, and with 1 minute and 6 seconds left and 3 timeouts, instead of just rushing back to the line and doing it again, you use one of the timeouts, which means you have to onside kick it. And it took away the timeout that they could have stopped the clock and made them punt the ball back to them down 2 and maybe at least try to get a play or 2 off and then go to the sideline. So I thought that was pretty disastrous at the end of the game by McDermott to use that timeout. But my biggest take on this game is that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. Like, the Buffalo Bills defense showing the vulnerability that they did. Everybody wants to pick apart the Chiefs week after week after week. And, how do they keep getting away with this? They're not actually that good. They're worse this year. This is the year that, Buffalo takes them down. Josh Allen. And I feel like most of the coverage from this game, I just listened to like 3 or 4 podcasts, had a long drive. And most of the coverage from this game is just about Josh Allen. And believe me, nobody is a more like I've been, stumping for Josh Allen and Lamar to be the MVP over Saquon at the behest of the entire Eagles Twitter. But Josh Allen, it shouldn't be the story from this game. The story should be that there's a 10-3 team that they just gave up 44 points. And, you take away the block punt. They gave up 37 points then to a Rams offense that, is good and can be really good. We held them to 20. The other, just 2 weeks ago. They've certainly been held to points totals like that recently. So showing this vulnerability, I think this game, in terms of the defensive side of the ball, showed more vulnerability than anything I've seen from Kansas City all year long. And people seem to pick every win of theirs apart. Great comment there from Kev about Puka. It is a wonder that he wasn't drafted higher, and coaching and environment are so important. I agree. Part of that was there was a lot of I am friends with a BYU beat reporter, and let's just say he had a lot of like off the field concerns, Puka, at BYU, and a lot of things that apparently the BYU staff may have covered up while he was at BYU. That's all I'll say. I have some inside funny stories about Puka Nacua from college, but I do think that a lot of the reason he fell was in part some of that, and he also had some injury issues in college as well. I remember the one year that BYU was pretty good. I think would that have been the year? I wonder if I don't know if that would have been the Zach Wilson year, if that's too long ago at this point. There was a year where Puka was kind of in and out of the lineup. And I remember every week on College Game Day, it was like the Puka Nacua report. And before I even knew who Puka Nacua really was, I was like, what a name, Puka Nacua. And then now he's a top 5 receiver in football, probably. Is he? Is Puka a top 5 receiver?
Probably.
Yeah, he's right there. I mean, Jefferson, Jamar, Amon-Ra, AJ, Puka,
Chase.
I said Jamar.
Oh, okay.
Jamar, Jefferson, AJ, Amon-Ra were the first 4 that came to my head. I might be forgetting an obvious one. Yeah, Tyreek. So Puka's not top 5, but he's right outside of it. Although Tyreek's been a little bit down this year.
Yeah. The Bills defense thing is weird because their defense hasn't been bad this year. Like, I'm looking at their schedule and they have 6 games where they've held an opponent to, if they have 5 games where they've held an opponent to 10 or less points. They did it to San Fran, Seattle, Tennessee's not impressive. They did it to Jacksonville's not impressive. They did it to Miami back when Tua was playing. It's like they've had good success. If you look by DVOA, I think they're like the 11th best defense. By EPA, they're like league average in EPA per play allowed. But this was certainly a bad game. I don't think I would go so far to say like they can't stop anybody. Sometimes like a game just is like that. I feel like their defense has been better than that throughout this season, but it was definitely like a massive letdown. And sometimes Stafford gets rolling and he's just hard to stop. Daniel
commented CD as part of that receiver conversation. Yeah, he's obviously in that mix as well in the top 5. He also Daniel had a comment earlier about Seattle when we were talking about them that they'll go as far as the O-line takes them. And I did hear stat about that I think they've played like 3 of the bottom 10 or bottom 5 D lines in terms of pressures and sacks over the last 4 weeks in this win streak. So that's probably those are good matchups for Seattle when they have to play better pass rushes. I think that'll be a bigger problem. But back to the Buffalo LA game. I'm not saying Buffalo can't stop anybody going forward, or there's no chance they'll make stops in the playoffs. I'm just saying when we're picking apart these elite teams at the top of the AFC and these, top-notch, legit Super Bowl contenders, Kansas City seems to get picked apart every close win that they have. And, people want to have these think pieces about the offense and why it's down and things like that. I am, after this game, even with the fact they've been mostly good this year on defense, I'm more concerned about the defense of Buffalo than I am anything with Kansas City. And we did also see, like, early in the year, and they righted the ship, but early in the year, Buffalo gave up 28 to Arizona to lead off the year. They gave up 35 to Baltimore in week 4. And then you look in the middle of the year, they really kind of they evened out, and they played really well, especially for that middle stretch of the season and going into that Kansas City game where they held them to 21. But that was at home, and now that they're 2 losses behind Kansas City, I don't know if they're getting Kansas City at home.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's keep rolling along here. Let's go to Chicago at San Francisco. And San Francisco just dominated this game. They take a 24-0 lead at half, and they held the Bears to 4 yards on 5 possessions in the first half. That is the least amount of first half yards by any team since at least 2000. So the Bears had 4 yards at halftime. George Kittle had 138 yards at halftime, to give you an idea how this game went. The Bears did score to open the second half, but they were down 24-0, and it took them 10 minutes to go score. And then Caleb Williams lost his first fumble in the NFL on the next drive. He was sacked 7 times, and just disaster for Chicago. For the 49ers, 49ers running backs just work. Like, Christian McCaffrey is out, and Jordan Mason looks good. And then Jordan Mason is out, and Isaac Guerrero steps in, and he had 78 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. He had 50 receiving yards, and then he got hurt in the fourth quarter. It didn't seem to be too bad, though. He didn't come back in, but hopefully he'll be fine, because he's a guy that I liked. He was fun. He's a fast guy in the draft, so I'd be interested to see what he's able to do in this offense. But if you are a pending college graduate, that plays running back, man, just cross your fingers and hope that the 49ers draft you. Because if they do, you're going to be awesome.
It's funny. Isaac Guerrero, not to bring fantasy into this again, but Isaac Guerrero, there's a big thing called free agency budget that a lot of fantasy leagues have taken and adopted. And fantasy budget means that you have $100 throughout the year to place on waivers all year long. And a lot of people, what they do, especially if they start the year hot and they haven't used any early on, they bank it until, a week 13, a week 14, where a running back goes down, and you go and spend all that $100 on Isaac Guerrero to save your season and to plug in going into the fantasy playoffs. A lot of people did that throughout the country last week when Christian McCaffrey got hurt. They went out and picked up Guerrero, used their entire free agency budget. There are a lot of people across this great country, Shane, that are updating their fantasy apps every hour to see if there's an Isaac Guerrero injury update. And as of now, there's not. They think it might be a foot sprain. I don't know what that means. Is he done for the regular season? Luckily, I only have him in one league. But Isaac Guerrero, fantasy heads across the country waiting on bated breath for that man's injury status. And then on the other side, to also selfishly talk about my other interest, which is sports gambling. This is eventually going to get into a way to make fun of myself. But I'm up 64.5 units on the year in the NFL, having a good year, 98 and 79 overall on all my picks. If you shrink it down to just spreads and money lines, 72 and 48. All of that to say, Bears +4, my worst bet of the year by far. Never had a hope. I saw it was 14-0 before I knew the game was on, basically at 425. So that was one of my favorite bets of the week as well. It wasn't just like a small bet. So I almost appreciate it a little bit when you make a bet like that and you can immediately stop paying attention to it.
Yeah, at least it doesn't drag it out. It's just a clean break.
Yeah.
The thing about the Isaac Guerrero thing is with how Kyle Shanahan obviously just flaunts injury reporting protocols and rules. Mm-hmm. You may very well go into next weekend thinking that he's going to play, and in fact, he's done for the year. So you just never know because Kyle Shanahan gets that special pass to just lie on injury reporting.
He's a fantasy football terrorist, Kyle Shanahan, as Matthew Berry would say. That's what he is. I hate to call him that, but that's what he is.
Kev chiming in on Twitter asked if we think the Bears OC and Kellen Moore discuss first quarter plans every week. It certainly looked like it this week. Rough start there for the Bears. But
my question, and this is, would it be collusion if Nick Sirianni, like under the table, called Shane Steichen and was like, bro, like, can I just give you like a couple $100,000 here? And can we figure out some 10 to 15 plays? And maybe it's not Sirianni, maybe it's Howie, or maybe it's Jeffrey Lurie, or maybe that has to wait until the season's over for the Colts. But someone call Shane Steichen and let's get this back on the road.
Now, see what you do. You got to do this like all Cold War espionage. Like, just call and let Shane Steichen know. If you happen to script out a first 15 plays and just leave it in a binder that you drop in a trash can at this location at this time, if you come back the next day, there may or may not be a bag of cash like taped underneath the park bench. And so, nothing can be, it's a dead drop. It just, we don't know. Anybody could have found it. So I think that's how you get around the collusion aspect, maybe.
Shane Steichen getting fired from the Colts. I really don't think it'll happen, but Shane Steichen getting fired from the Colts would be one of the dumbest coach firings in recent memory, and B, I think maybe the best thing that could possibly happen to the Eagles. if Shane Steichen became available again, I don't even, you make him the OC the absolute minute that happens. But I don't think it's on Kellen. The Chris Long stats are out there. The pass run splits in the first 10 to 15 plays are so clearly in line with what Nick Sirianni did when he called plays in 2021 before Steichen took the play calling from him. And you compare it to the rest of the game when Kellen Moore's calling plays, and it's so different. in terms of the pass run alignment and some of the concepts. So maybe that's not as updated. I know that was like 2 or 3 weeks ago that he updated it, but I think it falls on Nick personally.
All right. Well, let's get into the Sunday night game now, and we'll go to Kansas City. The Chiefs-Chargers. Chiefs win 19-17. They lead 13-0 at halftime, but then they gave up 14 unanswered in the third quarter and found themselves down 17-16 with under 4 minutes to play. And I think we all know what happens, right? I mean, you don't even need to have watched the game to know that the Chiefs are going to drive down the field. They're going to hit the game-winning field goal, bonus points if it's a trick shot off the upright, because of course, that's just how this team plays. And this is their 15th consecutive victory in a one-possession game. Longest streak in NFL history. And we do the thing sometimes when we're looking to see which teams will regress the next year to be like, well, what was the record if you flip the result of every one-score game? When you've won 15 in a row, it just doesn't feel like it's luck anymore. Like, there's clearly a clutch factor that's hard to quantify, but it's there. But they're 10th in point differential in the NFL, despite having the best record at 12-1. They are behind. There are 3 teams with 5 losses each that rank above them in point differential.
Baltimore.
Yeah, Baltimore, Washington, and I can't remember who the other one was now. And there's a 4-loss team ahead of them too in point differential. But Mahomes was sacked 3 times. He was pressured on 38% of his dropbacks in this one, and he still made some magical throws throughout the game. And the Chiefs just find a way to win. And on the Chargers side, they were down J.K. Dobbins and Ladd McConkey coming into this game. They lost Will Dissey early in the game, and this is not a team that can really afford to lose skill position players because they've so mishandled skill positions for so long, and just unable to stand up to all of those injuries and beat, a Chiefs team that has the best record in the NFL. And so the Chiefs get the win. It seems like they squeak. Have they had a ridiculous win like this against every divisional opponent? They had the block chip shot field goal against the Broncos. They had the fumble last week, I think it was, against the Raiders in field goal range. So, yeah, they've had a ridiculous win like this against every divisional opponent, and it's just kind of absurd at this point.
With the Chiefs, I just think the people that are talking about Mahomes at all didn't watch this game. I thought he was awesome in this game, and he was under pressure a lot, and he was doing such a good job of avoiding it. And, it's such an example, in my opinion, of why a box score isn't always, what you need to follow when you're, talking about quarterback play, because Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes had pretty similar numbers in this game, and they were both sacked the same amount of times. I thought Mahomes was like levels above Herbert in this game, and Herbert had that one big missed throw in the first half, probably potentially would have been a touchdown, and that changes the game right there. I don't think people are paying attention to the Chiefs. They're just seeing that they win a close game, and they're like, oh, how do they keep doing it? The defense obviously has shown the ability in a lot of these games. There's been bad games recently, but I think this is a good sign for the defense that they held them. I think they were shut out in the first half, I believe. And then obviously they held them to 17 throughout the game. And then Patrick Mahomes made 2 of the best plays you will ever see a quarterback make on third down to go down the field in this game. And some of that is avoiding pressure, but the play he made where he avoided the sack on 3rd and 7 with 2 minutes left to basically clinch the fact that the Chargers wouldn't get the ball back so they could get the first down and run the rest of the clock off and get the field goal. That's the best play I've seen a quarterback make all year, potentially, maybe given the stakes of the moment. I just thought him avoiding the pressure, stopping right before the line of scrimmage. And then if you watch the side, there was an angle of that play from behind. I'd like to see the all 22 of that play. The way he threw it, there was like guys coming from multiple diagonals trying to get a hand on the ball. It didn't look, obviously the receiver he hit was open, but the intermediate part of the throw could have easily been a problem. And he was able to zip it in there at the exact right spot while avoiding a sack completely. That's why he's Patrick Mahomes. And are the numbers what they were in 2019 or whatever year you want to use? No. but he's just as good as he was then. And he shows it in the big moments like that. And I'm sure he's going to show it again in January and February, unfortunately, for a lot of people. I find myself like, I'm not rooting for the Chiefs, but I find myself like almost being against the Chiefs hate at this point. I'm a little tired of like all the Mahomes hate and the Chiefs hate and acting like they're lucky and acting like this is not like, they're 12-1. People are trying so hard to like predict the downfall of the Chiefs. And I just don't, I think it's dumb.
You'll be right eventually, right?
Yeah. It's
the people predicting the downfall for the Patriots were eventually right. It took Tom Brady leaving in free agency, but they were eventually right.
Yeah, and then on the other side, I don't want to hammer on Herbert, but there's a comment from Daniel. I'll never understand how Herbert hasn't taken that leap as a top tier quarterback, and I totally agree. He has not. There's big debates during the Eagles game yesterday. Mike Chiodo, big Philly sports Twitter guy, he's not anti-Jalen. I think he said he had Jalen like 8-12, which is absolutely fair. I would put him more like 6-ish, but the Justin Herbert thing, he said the top 5 is so far ahead of the rest of the NFL, and he listed Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Burrow, and Herbert. I just don't know how Herbert is far ahead of that next tier guys like the Jordan Loves of the world when you have a half that he gets shut out and misses a massive throw to get for a touchdown that could have changed the game. And, he only puts up 17 points in this game, and, he doesn't turn the ball over. He had, again, similar numbers to Mahomes in the game. But I just felt like there was multiple times in this game where the Chargers could have either gotten into it early or, really put it away late or made it difficult on the Chiefs late. And they kicked that field goal instead of scoring a touchdown on the last time they have the ball. And then the game's over. You give the ball back to the Chiefs. But I definitely didn't walk out of this game being like, oh, yeah, Justin Herbert's in that Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Burrow tier. I have a co-host on radio who hates Justin Herbert, and it's almost made me pro Justin Herbert because I almost have to like be like, all right, you're going way too far. Like, because he thinks he's like the 15th best quarterback, and he's wrong. He's dead wrong on that. I think he's like the 6th or 7th best quarterback. But my problem with Herbert only at this point is when he gets included with that truly, truly elite tier, because I don't think he's accomplished what any of those guys have accomplished yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's clearly he's solidly QB5 for me, but
that's fair. And I'm not even like debating if he's 5. It's more about if he's in that top 4 tier, kind of.
Yeah, we got a comment here from Kev that says the landscape we're in right now, if you don't run as a quarterback, you really can't be classified with that top tier. Which Burrow had a nice scramble against the Eagles a few weeks ago. Burrow's not going to scramble a lot. And Mahomes doesn't run a lot, but he scrambles a lot, I guess is the way I would term it, which is really the thing. Like, I just need you to be athletic enough to extend plays. But speaking of quarterbacks, Mark, we got breaking news here on the podcast from Ian Rappaport that Aiden O'Connell, who left the field in an air cast, is believed to have suffered a bone bruise and is actually a potential he might potentially play next week. So left the field in an air cast. We assumed it's like a season-ending injury, and apparently it's a bone bruise, and he might actually play this weekend. So
no Desmond Ridder revenge game. It was supposed to be Ridder against the Falcons.
Yeah, the script writers will get their edits down ASAP and take care of that. But let's get into our final game of the week, and it was the first game of the week. It's Thursday Night Football, a game that was massively important for the Philadelphia Eagles' chances at the 1 seed, and it did not break their way. It almost all but ensures the Eagles will not get the 1 seed. As the Detroit Lions beat the Packers 34-31, the Lions dominated time of possession, 36:06 to 23:54. So they had the time of possession edge by like 12 and a half, 13 minutes. They ran 76 plays to the Packers' 45 plays. They led 17-7 at halftime. But it all came down to a final possession after the Packers hit a field goal, with 3.5 minutes left to tie the game. And so here's the decision of the game, Mark. 43 seconds left. Green Bay has no timeouts, and it's 4th and 1 on the 21-yard line. Dan Campbell decides to go for it, and Goff gets stepped on and falls down, but he manages to still get the handoff to Montgomery, who gets the first down. You kick the field goal as time expires, you win the game. To me, this decision comes down to trusting. What do you trust more? Your offense to pick up 1 yard, or your defense not to give up points to a team with no timeouts and 30 seconds left? Where do you come down on that decision? I don't think it's as reckless as like people made it out to be for Campbell. But where do you come down on this?
No, I thought it was the right decision at the time, especially since you're guaranteed overtime, even, or not guaranteed overtime, but it's a tie game. You're not losing at that point. So I thought, if you're losing, it's a different conversation, but in a tie game, I was fine with it. The crazier one was the one that didn't work. The crazier one was I'm trying to get the exact situation here. 4th and 1, but it was at their own 31 with 1:29 left in the third, up a field goal. I thought that was crazy.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like the perfect example of what a superpower the tush push is, because like,
yes,
4th and 1 at the 31, at our own 31, to us doesn't sound that crazy because 4th and 1 is almost automatic, but that was such an example. Like, it's not automatic.
And that's where I was at. Like, putting the Eagles into that situation, I would love tush pushing, run out the clock, kick the field goal.
Mm-hmm.
For the Lions, who aren't going to do that, I mean, there's just a lot that can go wrong with the under center run. So I didn't love it. I would have kicked it there. I like the idea, and it's something I would do if I had the tush push up my sleeve. I probably would have just kicked it and trusted my defense with 30 seconds, no timeouts, to get the stop there. But regardless, I don't think it's crazy like a lot of people made it out to be. I wouldn't have ultimately done it the way the Lions did, but it's interesting. Thought experiment.
I don't even really have a take on what play they should run necessarily, I guess, for them, but I think they were right to go for it. As someone who was rooting for the Packers to win, I wanted them to kick a field goal, which is, I think, how I'd judge it. This game was the biggest non-Eagles result of the year for the Eagles, because now you need the Lions to lose 2. If they lost this game, it could have just been this game. Because of the common opponent stuff with the Lions and the Eagles. So now what I would say is the Eagles' hope, and I don't think this is likely whatsoever. I want to take a look at the Vikings' schedule. The only hope we have is the Vikings win out, the Lions win out, and we get the 15-1 Lions against the 14-2 Vikings on the last game of the year. We're the 2 seed. The Vikings go and win that game. The Vikings actually would get the 1 seed if they won out, even if the Eagles had the same amount of losses. And then the Lions are the 5 seed. The Eagles are the 2 seed, and no one's afraid of going to Minnesota. I'll go to Minnesota for the NFC Championship game. I'll drive there. I'll drive the team. I'll drive the bus there. But that's pie in the sky dreaming. I don't think Minnesota's going to beat at Seattle, Green Bay at home, at Detroit. They're probably not going to go 3-0 in those games. So, but just I actually think it might be more likely than the Lions losing 2 games.
Yeah, it probably is. Either way, any way you slice it, the Eagles' hopes for the 1 seed basically were ended by the result of that game. It's theoretically possible, but not likely. The other thing I had of note in this game, 2 things. Jared Goff hit on 13 straight passes in the 4th quarter, and it feels like every other week there's like a Jared Goff had 15 straight completions or whatever. So that's kind of crazy. And also got to shout out Tim Patrick. The last game he scored a touchdown in before this game occurred on December 19th, 2021. And he scored 2 touchdowns in this game. So shout out to Tim Patrick, who's come back for some major injuries over the last couple of years, finding the end zone twice there for Detroit. But that's about all I have on this game. Anything else for you?
Not much else. I still think I have the Fox Sports The Gambler radio station that I work with. We have a group chat, and weirdly, like the guys in the group chat, Luke Arcaney, who's a listener of our show and a good follow on Twitter, he thinks the Packers are like total frauds, and he's convinced everyone that I'm crazy about the Packers and that they're nowhere near the Eagles and the Lions. I didn't walk away from this game that the Packers played on Thursday night in Detroit, losing by 3 points on a last-second field goal, thinking that Green Bay isn't in the class of the Super Bowl contenders. I walked away thinking the defense had some problems, but I didn't even think this was like the offense at their peak, and they still put up 31 on a good Lions defense. I think Green Bay is very clearly the third best team in the NFC, and I think they're very clearly at least the sixth best team in the NFL still.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun watching the playoffs, especially on on both sides, but the NFC side is going to be interesting to see how it shakes out.
And I didn't watch this game and think, oh, there's no way Green Bay's beating Detroit in a playoff game in Detroit. They lost by 3. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's going to wrap up our recap here. Mark, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts, final words of wisdom you need to impart on the listeners?
My final word will be responding to Kev's comment. Sirianni was slaughtered for a similar decision when Saquon dropped it earlier in the season, though, and we lost. The reason that Sirianni was slaughtered for that decision is because we have the tush push, and it was 4th and 1, and there was no reason to do anything but tush push it. And we ran the stupid pass play on a 4th and 1, which was idiotic. The only decision that he had to make was either a field goal or a tush push, not any other play. That's why the tush push is the superpower that it is. But anyway, that game still frustrates me because the Eagles would have a chance at the 1 seed if that game went the way it should have.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you guys for joining us for episode 181 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review wherever you stream your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter. I am at ShaneHalfNFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr., and we will catch you guys next time.